We are exercising our option under the Memorandum of Understanding entered into in early 2000 with the joint strike fighter partner nations, the United States, Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, Denmark, Norway, and Turkey. We expect to begin taking delivery of the aircraft, the first F-35 Lightning II, in 2016. Together with infrastructure, training, simulators, weapons, and other items, our investment is valued at approximately $9 billion. This is one of the largest defense procurement projects in the history of Canada. So you can do the math.
Given that the mission in Afghanistan is coming to an end, what exactly, can you give us some specific examples of the uses of these aircraft and why this aircraft in particular is needed for them?
Sure. Well, as you can understand, our responsibilities extend well beyond the end of the mission in Afghanistan. Our responsibilities include, of course, our important patrols over Canadian aerospace through NORAD, future missions with NATO. As a significantly contributing member of NATO, we can anticipate, sadly, that other conflicts may occur. I think that's a reasonable expectation. We also have, of course, an ongoing need to be interoperable. That is to say that, I mentioned both NORAD and NATO. We are flying missions quite often shoulder to shoulder with other countries. And as was listed, there are a large number of our allies who are moving in the direction of purchasing this same set aircraft. So with that in mind, again, there is a need to be current, combat capable, and interoperable. So all of those factors and others that I know can be expanded upon by our Chief of the Air Staff, that's the reason that we believe this is the right aircraft for the types of missions, both current and future, that we can anticipate.
Quick follow-up. I can't believe that you don't know how much your maintenance contract is going to cost, because we've heard, and we're not in the military or in buying, that it could double the cost of these planes, or at least add $7 billion to the $9 billion already spent. So what is the ballpark for the cost?
As I said, the cost of the in-service support and maintenance will be negotiated at the time we acquire. But what I can say is that when you think about the fact that we're embarking on a program that has a number of, all of our allies are participating in, we see economies of scale not only in the purchase today, purchasing through the Memorandum of Understanding and the Joint Strike Fighter program gives us an 8% discount. That may not seem like a lot when we're talking about these numbers, but it is if we were to run another competitive process outside of acquiring through the MOU. It will be the same thing when we're looking at the in-service support contracts. We will have the economies of scale. We'll be participating in negotiating that contract with our allies, and so we expect to have, obviously, we expect to see better economies of scale and costs for the in-service support going through the MOU and negotiating with our allies.
What is the per unit cost then?
Well, I'm not going to state specifically what the per unit cost is, because as I've indicated, the $9 billion cost is for 65 aircraft, including all the onboard equipment and weapon systems. So you can do the math.
So that's the cost then?
That is the cost per aircraft.
Next question.
Captain Clark from the Globe and Mail. Mr. MacKay, in 2006, when your government announced the C-17s, the C-130Js, you announced the 20-year maintenance costs as well. Are you telling me that the Cabinet approved a $9 billion acquisition of fighter planes without having a firm estimate of how much the 20-year maintenance costs are going to be? You don't know what those costs are?
We, as I said, the reason we're moving today, and we should be, on the acquisition of the F-35s is that every day that we wait, we lose opportunities to access the global supply chain for our industry, and our aerospace industry deserves that. That loss of time would mean that we would wait till all of the MOU participants...
I'm sorry, my question was about whether you know what the 20-year support costs are. Do you know what they are? Have you got a firm estimate of them? That is the question. It's not...
As I said, the in-service support costs will be negotiated with our MOU partners. Of course, we have some estimates, but the actual aircraft is not in production yet. When the aircraft comes off the production line, we expect to negotiate the in-service support costs, and importantly, all of our aerospace companies will also have an opportunity to access those and compete for those in-service support costs. So we see it as a net benefit to the Canadian aerospace industry.
So what's the estimate?
Thank you, sir. You were given one question.
Mike Blanchfield, the Canadian Press. Would you be able to give us any more insight into the long-term the maintenance costs and what that might cost for over the 20-year lifespan of the aircraft?
Well, let me tell you how that is conducted, and maybe you can get a feel for how we actually do this. Every year, we have a very extensive review of the ownership costs of the airplane, and they go out to 2065 and beyond, and it's a very detailed cost assessment with all the different elements that go in it. Underpinning that is a framework, an infrastructure framework, where final decisions haven't been made yet. For instance, how many training centers will there be in the world to support the training for pilots who are now all flying the same equipment so we can consolidate some of the training infrastructure? How many maintenance, repair, and overhaul units will there be in the world once the airplanes are fielded in large numbers? Each nation gets a chance to decide what it wants to do in that process, and those decisions haven't been made yet. So a final exact number is not ready yet. Now, remember, there's been reference to a contract today. The contract is not between me and the government of Canada. The contract is between the government of contract and the United States government. When the Canadian airplanes are put on order, that order will come to us as part of a much bigger order for airplanes for the partnership. So there's a little bit of a misnomer that I'm going to walk out of here with a contract today. That's not the way these things work on this project. But there is a high level of fidelity that has been put together on defining the overall operating support cost for the airplane. There's a very significant economy that comes with the scale of this project and the commonality between the airplanes, and we are capturing those economies as we put together those estimates. So if you can tell me exactly how many airplanes you're going to have, exactly what bases they go to, how many years each one's going to be in service before it's retired, you know, we can bound the problem. You can see the variables that are there. The one thing we know is that there's a lot of attention being paid to ownership costs, and it's one of the great focuses on this airplane to drive those ownership costs down.
The contract is not between me and the government of Canada. The contract is between the government of contract and the United States government.
So you can do the math.
Roger Smith from CTV. When you talk about economies of scale, I assume the more planes you build, the cheaper they get. And I've heard or read figures that Lockheed has suggested to the Pentagon that the final cost would be around $65 million per plane. I'm wondering why Canada's paying $140 million a plane.
Okay, if you listen closely to what was said in the previous speakers,
I tried to.
That's the total cost of the program, which is much more than an airplane. It's an infrastructure, it's facilities, it's other things. It's the cost, you know, through life cost. It's the cost of the airplane program.
Well, can you break it down for us then, the cost of the plane, the cost of these other features, weapons, and that the defense minister mentioned?
No, I can't do it here in front of, you know. I mean, why would we take the time to do that? I mean,
sure. What I know about aircraft, you could stick in a thimble, but I know if one engine conks out, what do you do then? You just got one engine.
It won't.
We'll hold you to that. You know that.
I know you will.
Thank you.